a big news which has now come in, and once again, it's Donald Trump who is in the eye of the news. The American president has urged the NATO allies to adopt sweeping measures to pressurize Moscow, including imposing 50 to 100% of tariffs on China until the Russia-Ukraine war is over. In a lengthy post on Truth Social, Donald Trump addressed all the NATO countries and the world and said that he has said that Washington was prepared to move forward with major sanctions on Russia, but only if European partners halted the purchase of Russian oil and joined in a coordinated action. Remember, he has always been speaking about the fact that Russian oil only has been, kind of sponsoring and funding war against Ukraine. Akanksha is now joining us on the phone line. Akanksha, each day, Donald Trump makes it very clear, you buy Russian oil, you're going to have to pay the price.
Absolutely, and this is now doubling down as far as the pressure on Russia is concerned. Because remember, Pallavi, he's been urging all of G7 nations particularly to put a stop to any kind of purchase of Russian oil. And Donald Trump clearly in this Truth Social post is losing patience. He's already made it clear that he will do major sanctions on Russia, but only when all NATO countries are on board with the same sanctions and when they cease oil purchases from Russia. So he's gone on to say that I'm ready to go when you are, just when is the question. So he's clearly losing out on patience. And most of the NATO members, including Turkey or even various EU nations, have been continuing with their purchase of Russian oil and gas. In fact, as recently as this year itself, Ukraine was being paid by Russia for the gas pipelines that were being used by Russia in Ukraine. But having said that, China happens to be one of the biggest purchasers of Russian oil and gas. And so he's also doubled down in terms of his attack against China, where he's saying that he will call for 50 to 100% tariffs on China until the Russia-Ukraine war ends, because he's also been left quite embarrassed after a failed Alaska summit. Many have been questioning what was he able to achieve. So it's basically now him echoing the same sort of appeals that have been coming in from the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who's also been asking for sanctions not just against China but also India. But what's surprising over here is rather a pleasant surprise that he's not mentioned India in this entire post, which means that that's also an indication that the United States and India are perhaps very much in the middle or in the thick of the negotiations, and we can expect a positive outcome given that Donald Trump has in fact only referred to Russia and China this time around. But China also has a temporary relief. We'll have to see what comes their way by the end of November.
But also, Akanksha, do you think that the recent SCO summit where you saw Russia, China, India, all of them together and the kind of camaraderie, do you think that could have possibly also unnerved the American president?
It really has, and it has in fact fed into the kind of rhetoric that they have been trying to amp up, that it is India, China, which are in fact funding the war in Ukraine. And when the trio turned up in Tianjin, that in fact was a message to Donald Trump that they will not be bowing down to these sanctions or additional tariffs, because that is the strength of the developing economies which were represented at SCO, even though that's a security meeting. But several Eurasian economies, even the global south, the week that's gone by has also witnessed a virtual summit that was in fact held by Brazil as far as the BRICS summit was concerned. So we've seen that there's been a rallying of these global south economies, and they are good enough to sort of tackle the West, and the West is very much aware that they cannot do without business as far as these developing economies are concerned. EU is very mindful of that, and EU President Ursula von der Leyen, in fact, is very mindful of that. In her constant and consistent engagement with the Indian Prime Minister, she's always maintained that much can be achieved out of the FTA that is being forged between EU and India. And she, in fact, has appealed to Prime Minister Modi that he must use his good offices to, in fact, mediate the conflict in Ukraine. So Donald Trump, at the moment, all of his attack is also coming out from a space of frustration. Not only is he running out of time, but he's also being questioned in terms of the label that he's always given himself, that of being this messiah for peace, a man who deserves the Nobel Peace Prize. All of that has now been put to question, given that he's not achieved anything with the Russian President Vladimir Putin, who rather from the Chinese soil had attacked him and had corrected him for his demeaning language, especially for gigantic economies like India and China.
Okay, Akanksha, thank you very much, but do hold on with us if it's possible. Ravindra Sachdeva is also now joining us on the phone line. Thank you very much for speaking to us. What do you make of this, Sachdevji, the kind of arm twisting, if I may call that, of the American president? You buy Russian oil, you're going to have to pay a huge amount of tariff.
No, certainly. I mean, there are multiple layers playing out. One is, the U.S. is playing in a way the good cop, bad cop routine with India. Trump is becoming the good cop and his lieutenants are becoming the bad cops, threatening and he's saying, massaging ego, etc. Secondly, we can expect now the tempo and crescendo for the EU and also, by the way, the G7 to impose tariffs on countries importing oil from Russia. Okay, today only I think they've called for a meeting with the G7, I think Scott Bessent or something, to discuss exactly this issue. So what it could mean is that India could, definitely face additional tariffs due to Russian oil on the oil part of the deals. China could also be, I think, this time round, because now it will become very obvious, starkly, if sanctions or tariffs are not imposed on China, which is a bigger buyer than India of the Russian oil, right? So there is a probability, I would think, that if this time the EU gets pressured in and does decide to take action and says, okay, we are imposing 50% tariffs on all who import, India, for them, it seems to be a soft target, right? But China, will they do it? And EU wants its own relations with China. So that's all there. Plus then also the G7. A virtual meet of the finance ministers to discuss this exact issue. So in the overall, I think the issue with tariffs due to Russian oil will heat up. That is now separate than the issue on the trade deal with the US of India being discussed, which is the 25% tariffs. So what it seems also is that the US has decided, I think, to decouple the trade matters and the Russian oil matters.
Okay, I do hold on, because I'm just going to go across to former diplomat, Mr. KB Fabian as well. Thank you so much for joining us. The recent SCO summit, where possibly the camaraderie between Russia, China, India, would you say that has also unnerved Donald Trump, and also the duplicity, because they are objecting to us buying Russian oil or anyone buying Russian oil, but America also happens to be one of the biggest purchaser of, say, Russian energy, gas?
Well, I think we have to understand one or two things. Even when Trump just the other day said nice things about Prime Minister Modi, I had taken the position that we have to take it with a pinch of salt. Second point is that, Trump talks about secondary sanctions. Now, he's not using the words correctly, because secondary sanctions mean that in case America sort of applied sanctions on Iranian oil, and if an Indian company purchases it, then what happens is that that company is sanctioned, meaning that company cannot do any business with the United States. And in the real world, it cannot do business even with another company in Italy, because nobody wants to touch a company which is sanctioned by the United States. But in the present case, he is not punishing the oil importing company. He is punishing the exporter of seafood, textiles, and German jewelry. So there is a certain, Trump is using the words incorrectly. But that apart, now we are told that he is asking the G7. I don't expect the G7 to agree to it. I cannot think of UK agreeing to it, France agreeing to it, Canada agreeing to it, and even Germany. it's only the NATO Secretary General who has been talking so much about, imposing tariffs on India, but I don't think he has got real political support. So I don't think we should worry much about it.
We shouldn't worry too much about it. Okay, Mr. Sachdev, where do you think it's going to go on from here now? I mean, you cannot arm twist, say, a country like China, and Russia is, of course, going to start calling the bluff and is also, in a sense, giving a thumbs down to America. What do you foresee is going to be happening next?
I mean, in the big picture of things, I do think that America will get even more aggressive. Okay. Notwithstanding the setbacks they may be facing, but America and Trump, that is, will persist in his aggressive, worldview. And they will try to, figure out one way or the other way. Tariffs are not working. Some other reason may come up, BRICS and the talk of dollars on BRICS and all. America is essentially looking to contain the rise of China on the one hand, but I think more than that now, America is looking to pre-establish its global hegemony and dominance for this, next whatever century, as per what Trump feels will be the best way forward for America. That's what Trump feels. So he is going to absolutely, I think, dig down and keep on going. He may move back a bit, come back a bit, all of that. He'll spar like in a boxing match. He loves sparring. He loves, negotiating hard and, going off tangent, etc. That's his typical business style also that he grew up into that business style in the New York of 1980s when they were dealing with unions, mafias, flamboyants, girls, social parties, scandals, everything, right? He fought through it. So he will, I think, keep on at it. But at the same time, what this will mean is that the quote-unquote rest of the world is learning lessons. We are learning huge lessons, I think, without doubt. And the rest of the world, there are realignments happening. You mentioned the SCO. I was there at the SCO summit the day after Prime Minister and Xi Jinping meeting at a conclave of the think tanks to review the outcomes of the SCO and the Global South. And what I could sense was clearly, the Global South generally and the SCO more or less, they are all trying to, the unsaid, elephant in the room is the United States, but they're all trying to beef up their own relations, synergies, cultural exchanges, etc. So that will grow, I think, and it will be a nuanced foreign policy we will have to pursue, of course, with Russia, with China, not blindly. I mean, with China, it's got to be inch by inch on various things. Let's see. Let's probe if China is willing. China may have been willing for slight warmth more. I think one reason could have been also the SCO summit. Xi Jinping wanted to make it a success, which was to his, he's the host. So China may have, mellowed a bit because of that. But let's see if the mellowing of China and coming to the discussion table and lowering firstly
but Mr. Fabian, where does this leave India? Because, that kind of pressure he has, of course, imposed an additional 25% tariff on us because of us buying Russian oil. And we've always made it very clear that we are going to do what is best for the country. What do you think about India in this context, especially since Donald Trump of late seems to be mellowing down? Mr. Fabian, if you can hear me. Okay, Mr. Sachdev, the same question which I was asking just now is that, as far as the Russian oil is concerned, India has made it very clear that we will do what is best for our country. They've already imposed 25% tariff on us. So where do you foresee, what do you think is going to be the next scenario, especially considering that Donald Trump seems to be mellowing down vis-a-vis India?